Before the Second World War, Estonia was an independent and rich country. 97% of the inhabitants were Estonian, the local people. In August 1939, the Estonian farmers hoped to get high yields. Yet, throughout the years of our independence, the great eastern neighbor, Russia, remembered of having lost the window to Europe, once cut by Peter the Great. On August 23, the two mighty ones, Germany and Russia, Hitler and Stalin, agreed upon the redistribution of Europe. Russia was to get back his window, Finland, Latvia and Estonia, by the notorious Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. On June 17, 1940, the Soviet troops crossed the Estonian border. The Stalinist regime deported more than 30,000 Estonians, men, women and children, to Siberia. Many of them could never see their homes again. On the 9th of March 1944, the Soviet air forces bombed Tallinn, the capital of Estonia, in the most barbarous way. For years there was spread the legend about women being the pilots of these bombers. The National Opera House and the Harju Street fell into ruins, and thousands of people lost their homes. It was on August 23, 1987, that the existence of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact as a secret deal made between two powers was for the first time spoken out publicly at a meeting held in Tallinn. Gorbachev's new line of perestroika had enhanced the courage of people. In April the following year, the full assembly of the Estonian intelligentsia opposed itself to the existing power system as a united anti-communist force. The Soviet power had banned the usage of the Estonian national colors. Yet, in the beginning of the summer, one could see a few blue-black-white national flags timidly flying here and there. It was the Estonian Heritage Society that brought out both the prohibited national colors and the flag. The Heritage Society was a social movement founded on the initiative of the Estonians themselves after 50 years. The blue-black-whites regained power, and by our famous nightly held song festivals, there were a lot of them already. Following the appeal by the Popular Front, people came here to the Song Festival ground also on the 11th of September to give support to the ideas of freedom, although at that time only very few could dare to say out the word freedom. It was rather serenity. Now we were already sure that once we will win anyhow.
Selleks palveks nüüd sea. Looja, hoia.
The years under the red flag were not the best ones for our people. There were sufferings, pain, and betrayal. On the day of independence in 1989, it was decided to hoist on the top of the Tower Tall Herman the national blue-black-white instead of the Soviet red flag. At that time, our statehood still did not match the blue-black-white idea, but the dreams carried here over generations of once joining again free nations of the world could now be better seen. The next year meeting in Hirve Park was already self-evident. Never in history had people come together to stand in a chain stretching from Toompea in Tallinn throughout Latvia to the capital of Lithuania, Vilnius.
Selg sirgu lüüa ja heita endalt orjarüü. Loomishooks kõik lood koos võiks sündida kui uuesti. On koit, kuninglik loit, valguse võit, äratab maa. Prii on taevapiir, esimene kiir, langemas me maale. Kõik, murrame kõik, et vabana saaks hingata taas. Näe, on murdunud jää, ulatagem käed, ühendagem väed. Nõul, ühisel nõul, ühisel jõul, me suudame kõik. Ees on ainus tee, vabaduse tee, teist ei olla saagi. Võim, valguse võim, priiuse võim, läheme koos.
By that time, the Russian-speaking population had formed the Inter-movement to protect the so-called friendship and brotherhood of all the people. The internationalists condemned the fascist, racist and nationalist Estonians at their meetings. These gatherings were characterized by fear and blind hatred. The movement was financially supported by the all-union military factories. The Estonian Congress assembled in March 1990. After the period of half a century, it was the first freely elected representative body of the Estonians. Now, the Republic of Estonia was not only a legal fiction, but also existed through its citizens. Free elections to the Supreme Soviet were still to take place. In May, Russia proclaimed economic blockade against Lithuania. The Baltic states decided to help each other. The union of the three, concluded in 1939 in Geneva, was restored in Kadriorg. The empire-bound powers were definitely not satisfied with the course of events. On the 15th of May, the internationalists gathered once again, and this time on Toompea. The pro-Moscow-minded delegates, climbing through a window to the balcony of the Toompea castle, were stormily greeted by the crowd. The head of the Internationalist Strike Committee, Mikhail Lysenko, called upon to overthrow the government of Savisaar. It was also intended to hoist the symbol of occupation, the red flag. A mad crowd made its way to the garden of the castle. Edgar Savisaar called over the radio the Estonians for help, and they did come.
Me olime kindlad teis, et kui te tulete meile appi, te teete seda tõesti just nii, nagu te tegite, mõistusega, lauluga, südamega ja just nii me olemegi kõige tugevamad.
The supporters of the inter-movement had grown in strength by the end of the year. Gorbachev announced that in case the Baltic states were not going to abrogate the legislative acts adopted during the last years, as well as the Declaration of Independence, military dictatorship would be introduced there. The Baltic states refused to sign the Union agreement. In answer to that, certain forces did their best to create conflicts. On the 12th of January, armored cars appeared in the streets of Vilnius. The TV tower and the press house were occupied. Gorbachev assured again everybody that army would never go against the people. Yet, already the next day, people were shot from the tanks and 14 Lithuanians were killed. The leader of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, wanted to express his own attitude to what had happened in the Baltics. Russia, Estonia, Lithuania and Latvia signed an appropriate declaration in Tallinn, severely condemning the violence. But not the bloodshed nor the mourning in the Baltics brought the empire-minded to their senses. On the 15th of January, the internationalists made once again their way to Toompea. This time they demanded the re-establishment of the USSR constitution and the formation of a new government, including also the representatives of the inter-movement. Probably they relied on the armed forces of the Soviet Union. The inter-movement radio station Nadezhda called upon the workers of the all-union factories to form so-called attack units. The Toompea Castle, the house of the Supreme Soviet, was prepared for the worst possibilities. The Crisis Committee of the Supreme Soviet decided to form our own defense forces with appropriate training for the defense of the country. Certain defense structures were set up on Toompea. Concrete construction blocks and granite rocks were carried up to the spot. The head of the Tallinn garrison of the Soviet Army, Vice Admiral Belov, named this psychological instigation of war. The building of barricades was definitely psychological, but rather a psychological form of defense. The concrete blocks remained on Toompea till Russia and numerous other states in the world had recognized the independence of Estonia. Time and again had the Estonians proved their aspirations. It was by the Declaration of Independence adopted on November 16, 1988. It was by the Baltic chain. Yet, Moscow argued that the Baltic states had no exact data about how many people were really for liberty. Thus, the Supreme Soviet of the Estonia decided to arrange a referendum on this question on the 3rd of March 1991.
hääletas iseseisva ja sõltumatu Eesti Vabariigi poolt.
Moscow was not pleased with these results. Following the demands of the inter-movement and on the initiative of Moscow, it was decided to carry out a new referendum. This turned out to be a farce. No routine was worked out for the all-union enterprises as well as the military bases located in Estonia in carrying out this referendum. In order to allure more people, indictments were on sale in the polling stations. The local Communist Party announced that the lists of the voters were secret. Thus, whoever wanted could vote in as many polling stations as he wished. No identification documents were asked from the voters. But still, the old models did not function in this time and the show failed. In the end of May, special units of the Soviet militia, the OMON troops, attacked the control posts on the economic borders of the Baltic states. The Riga OMON troops gave their, so to say, performances also in Estonia, in Luhamaa, Murati and Ikla. In Tallinn, in the headquarters of the Estonian non-military defense units, a bomb was set up as a case of provocation. The interior of the historic building got considerably damaged, and only by pure accident were people not injured. What happened in Moscow on the 19th of August was not any more a simple row of a band. The pro-Soviet gang desired back dictatorship and the old dear totalitarian state. They probably relied their hopes on the command system that had existed in the society for decades. The process of restoring independence in Estonia had got in danger. The Soviet-minded delegates of the Supreme Soviet left the session hall just before the adoption of the most important decision for Estonia. The Estonians were once again called upon to defend the vital centers of the Republic, the TV and radio houses, to prevent here what had happened in Riga and Vilnius. We knew we were not strong, but our mental power was enormous. The self-consciousness of the Estonians in August 1991 was different from that in August 1987. We were ready to resist the way we had learned from the book, knowing that we might have to fight a struggle for 100 or 200 or 300 years to win it anyhow. The Soviet troops from Pihkva crossed the Estonian border. Elderly people remembered the year 1940 when it had once already happened. In the morning, the Soviet tanks were 10 kilometers from Tallinn. The city council of Tallinn had no information about their route. The people in the city knew even less. By the noon of the 20th August, the soldiers had been accommodated in the Soviet army barracks in Tondi and in the all-union military factory Dvigatel. There the lists of the objects to be seized were once more run over. Once again in history had we been given their time, but nobody knew yet if it was in favor or against us. The Popular Front called the Estonians to the Liberty Square in Tallinn to protest the pro-Soviet-minded clique and its aspirations. And people came, no matter that Moscow had forbidden all mass meetings. Now we had to be ready for anything. be it concealed resistance or immediate action, or even a long period of await. On Toompea, there were trucks with heavy loads of sand and concrete to protect the way up to the castle. Thanks God that in case of real threat we have always got rid of differences in convictions. The board of the Estonian Committee came to the session hall of the Supreme Soviet on Toompea to give their support to the Supreme Soviet in passing the historic decisions. The Supreme Soviet of Estonia could not but declare the independence of Estonia.
Ettepaneku poolt on 69 rahvasaadikut, vastu ja erapooletud saadikuid ei ole. Otsus vastu võetud.
As one could expect, the Soviet army took the independence of Estonia for nothing. 5 hours after the delegates had left Toompea, the army attacked the TV tower. It was the early morning of the 22nd of August. The first 2 floors of the TV tower were conquered in 7 minutes. Still, the Red soldiers could not get higher than the 21st floor, because 4 men had closed themselves behind the iron door leading to the 22nd floor, where all the basic technical equipment was located. The Estonian television had to stop its transmissions. The Estonian radio continued on one wave only. People gathered around the TV tower and tried to talk to the soldiers. At 5 p.m., Edgar Savisaar and the Minister of Interior Affairs, Olev Laanjärv, arrived at the place. By that time, only the greatest optimists could hope that the soldiers would not stay here long. The Estonians were ready for the worst. Still, after short negotiations, the military troops began to leave the place. Meanwhile, events in Russia had developed favorably for us, and the army had to obey its generals by leaving the tower and its surroundings. Like it had once already happened, we had again got a chance to get free thanks to Russia. Through Lithuania and Latvia, the fire of freedom reached Estonia. Now it was time to clear off the last symbols of communism from the Estonian towns. What had seemed to be unbelievable some years ago became a reality now. Lenin gave way to other monuments. The independent Estonia was visited by the US Secretary of State James Baker, the French Foreign Minister Roland Dumas, and the Foreign Minister of Germany Hans-Dietrich Genscher. The first after-war embassy was opened in Tallinn by the Swedish Foreign Minister Sten Andersson, and then numerous countries all over the world recognized us. And once again did the Estonians come to the Song Festival ground, but this time it was to say goodbye to the idiocy of totalitarianism. We only have to hope that we manage to leave the inhuman and agonizing system behind us now and forever.
Ärgem seadkem endile madalaid sihte. Tuleb julgeda, uskuda, võimatuna näivat. Nii nagu me 3 aastat tagasi siinsamas lauluväljakul uskusime, et ükskord me võidame niikuinii. Õnne sulle, vaba Eesti! Ära unusta, et ka pilvest ilmaga on pilvede taga sind alati ootamas päike.
And it will be for the future to show us how quickly will we be able to adapt our country and ourselves to the developed, normal world so close to us and yet so far. Today, we know better than ever that we will have to be extremely patient and unbelievably determined to let the desirable tomorrow come to Estonia and stay here forever.